You are going to want to watch all the way through to the end of this video because I found quite possibly the dumbest pro-immigration video. And it wasn't made by a leftist, it wasn't made by some communist who doesn't believe in borders, and it wasn't made by a billionaire telling us why depressing wages is a good thing. It was made by a regular, everyday Aussie bloke. His name is Topher Field, Australia's leading libertarian with over 55,000 followers on Twitter and nearly 120,000 subscribers on YouTube. He recently made a very controversial video in the lead up to the first March for Australia against mass migration in August titled, "It's worse than you think and we're making a huge mistake," with the video captioned, "We need to talk about immigration." I agree, we do need to talk about immigration. We need to talk about its effects and its threats. Because apparently the threat of sectarian conflict, including Islamic terrorism, the inability for his own children to afford a home, the skyrocketing cost of everything, constant migrant crime, and a general decline in the collective quality of life still has not convinced Mr. Field to oppose mass migration. But maybe he's not convinced by anecdotal evidence, or he's not been affected for the anecdotal evidence to matter to him. So I thought I would put together this little video for him, reacting to what he has to say and debunking his points with facts and logic, with empirical evidence and the data to back up my claims. Let's see if his points and ideas can convince us, or whether his points go down like a lead balloon.
Feminists blame the patriarchy for everything. Communists blame the capital class for everything. And it seems that a large number of Aussies have decided to blame immigration for everything. And just like the feminists are blaming the patriarchy for their own problems, and the communists are blaming the capitalists for their own laziness, so Australians now are blaming our population growth for our own incompetence. And that matters, because if we waste our time and energy fighting the wrong problem, then our problems just get worse.
The difference is that feminists and communists are just bitter, selfish, narcissistic people with no regard for the truth, and oftentimes most feminists and communists are not ride or die. Feminism and communism are ideologies based first and foremost as hating a particular group as the Great Satan. For feminists, that's the men, and for communists, that's the rich. I like the expression feminism dies at the dinner table because no feminist remains a feminist once the check hits the table on a date, and no communist remains a communist once they earn some money or set up their own small business. Both feminism and communism are built on the politics of envy of men for being stronger, richer, and more successful, and envy of the rich for the same reasons. Both feminism and communism are individualistic ideologies. Although the claims of feminists and communists hold no water, nationalists can back up our claims with evidence, and we'll get to the evidence later in the video. But nationalists are not fluid in our beliefs, meaning we do not change them when convenient, as opposed to feminists and communists. And in what manner have Australians been incompetent? Times are getting tough for the average Australian right now thanks to inflation and immigration, one of which devalues the currency and the other one of which devalues the work, meaning Australians are having to work even harder to obtain the same belly of wages than immediately preceding the pandemic. You don't think the average Australian parent is working harder now than they were 6 years ago to continue providing for their families? If anything, the average Australian is more competent now than they were 6 years ago. Do you even know what incompetence means? Do you even know what the hell you were talking about? If Usain Bolt lost a foot race to Sonic the Hedgehog, would that make Usain Bolt an incompetent sprinter? If the second worst team beat the worst team, would they no longer be an incompetent team just because they won once?
We would have loved for all of these people that are getting all excited about population growth and immigration to instead come and invest their energy into fixing the real problems, the ones that we've been fighting. But instead, we've got these idiots who just woke up in the last 5 years running around saying, "Oh, look at you, fat lot of good you've all done all that time, and what have you achieved so far?" Well, clearly we haven't achieved enough, I agree. But it's a bit rich that so many people who have sat on the sidelines and refused to get involved in politics, refused to support those who did get involved, and refusing to get active for any one of the many different campaigns which they could have been active in, and now suddenly, well, they've got their knickers in and not over immigration.
This is such a disgusting straw man and an outright lie that we've sat on the sidelines. I just turned 20 years old, and as a teenager, I not only ran for Parliament, but I got disendorsed because I was willing to speak the truth about Christianity, white Australia, and LGBT. I've been political for almost 7 years now. Wow, 2019 was almost 7 years ago. What about you? What did you achieve politically before your 20th birthday? The idea that we've sat on the sidelines is complete bullshit. Many people are waking up to immigration. They didn't wake up to government overreach or COVID or the climate hoax or whatever, is because once immigration reaches a certain point, it is irreversible. Once whites become a minority in Australia, That is it. Australia is over. We only have a very short window of opportunity in which we can save our country, ensure the continued existence of white Australians as the majority, and implement remigration. This is literally a case of life and death, and thus requires our immediate attention until the problem is solved. Another reason so many Australians are waking up is because at every turn we've had our desires completely ignored. The majority of Australians did not want to permit non-white immigration in the 70s. The majority of Australians thought there was too much Asian immigration in the 90s. The majority of Australians thought there was too much Islamic immigration in the 2010s, and in every decade from the 70s till today, the Australians have constantly demanded a cut to immigration and have been completely ignored. COVID lasted for only 2 years, the coalition has abandoned net zero, shifting the Overton window in our direction, and many leftists consider Australia to be far behind the rest of the developed world politically. I'd say we're in a pretty good place if our only problems were non-immigration. One of two things will happen when white Australians start to reach minority status. Either it will turn into Brazil and the hundreds of years of white history will be erased overnight, where 40% of the population will be white, 40% mixed, and 20% everything else, or it will turn into South Africa or Zimbabwe, where it will immediately become open season on whites. Do you really think it's a good idea to import millions of people from countries who believe the only reason they are poor is because the white man raped and pillaged their country? White people are being replaced, we are being ethnically cleansed, we are being genocided. If that's not a real problem, then what is? White men, women and children are being raped and murdered en masse. If that's not a real problem, then what is? White Australians may not exist in 2100. If that's not a real problem, then what is? We can reverse net zero, we can reverse government overreach, we can reverse almost anything, but we can never reverse our own replacement. Once we're gone, we're gone. Africa's population at the dawn of the scramble for Africa was 100 million, it's 1.5 billion today, and is projected to be 4.5 billion by 2100. A 45-fold increase in only 200 years. I do not want that for Australia.
And that somehow magically they're going to get results and fix everything by stopping immigration.
Yes, we will. We will fix all or at least most of our problems by stopping immigration and implementing remigration. The high cost of everything else can be traced back to, for the most part, housing costs. As immigration went up, so did the price of houses, as did the cost of mortgages, as did the cost of rents, as did the strain on families. This is due to the competition between those already here and the migrants, forcing prices up for a stagnant supply. Over 2 million people have entered Australia since COVID, and only 700,000 houses have been built. For every 3 people who've entered, only 1 new house has been built. Do you seriously think that has no effect on housing prices whatsoever? And without natural wage growth plus mass migration placing downward pressure on wages had to be artificially increased to meet demand, which raised the price of everything else. Take, for instance, small businesses who either had to go out of business because they couldn't afford the cost of labour, or raise their prices to pay for the labour and going out of business because nobody could afford their prices anymore. All of this is fantastic news for the big businesses, because the big essential businesses could raise their prices even more due to a lack of competition and lower their wages due to a glut of labour.
My name's Topher Field, this is the Topher Project, and it seems that my lot in life is to tell people the truth and be hated for it. I've been doing it since 2009, when people hated me for talking about water and water mismanagement and the need to ditch the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. I've since been hated for defending free speech consistently, ever since Julia Gillard tried to censor us with her News Media Council. I've been hated for telling the truth about climate change. I was hated for telling the truth about COVID. Now that immigration has suddenly become the latest drama, the latest distraction for the masses, I'm being hated for telling the truth about that too.
You accuse us of getting distracted, yet you're talking about some fucking dam and some News Media Council from almost 15 years ago that probably nobody remembers. Do you really think that is a more productive use of political commentary than covering the mass rape of our women and children? Never mind the fact that there's literally no evidence that immigration is a distraction, considering there was a media blackout on the second march, and the media spent its time calling those who attended the first march for Australia in August racist. Let me think. Who else didn't talk about the second march and called the first march racist? Oh, that's right, you. This raises an interesting question about who you actually work for. Maybe you aren't the independent journalist you claim to be, considering you do toe the establishment line fairly often.
Okay, so the narrative is that our population is growing too fast, and that's the cause of our economic, infrastructure, housing, crime, and cultural woes.
That's all true. Immigration has resulted in our housing, infrastructure, crime, economic, and cultural woes. As stated earlier, over 2 million people have entered Australia since COVID, and only 700,000 houses have been built. Furthermore, all 5 major cities are in the top 14 most expensive cities in the world. Adelaide is nearly as unaffordable as Los Angeles. That's housing. Traffic congestion in Brisbane, according to the RACQ, is worse than prior to COVID, and in Sydney and Melbourne, the two cities most affected by mass migration, public transport usage is up 14% and 6% respectively. And in Sydney alone, over 100 million more trips have been taken with public transport than before COVID. That's infrastructure. Australia doesn't break down crime by race, but the UK does. Whites make up 82% of the British population and 73% of the prison population. Blacks 4% of the population and 12% of the prison population. Asians, which includes Indians, 9% and 8%, mixed 3% and 5%, and others 2% and 2%. Whites are significantly underrepresented in prison statistics, blacks are 3 times overrepresented in prison statistics, Asians and others' prison statistics are in line with their population numbers, although Asians make up 75% of group-based child sexual exploitation criminal numbers, and mixed British are up to 2 times overrepresented. That's crime. I did some calculations in one of my first Substacks as to whether there was a relationship between high immigration and declining real wages, looking at data between 2014 and 2024. The data shows an inverse relationship, a moderate negative correlation between high immigration and high real wages. A correlation of negative 0.48. That's my Year 12 Unit 3-4 General Mathematics finally getting put to good use. Thanks, Mr. V. Showing that there is a correlation between high immigration and declining real wages. That's economics. And we're seeing the breakdown of relations between Jews and Muslims, where both groups have been at each other's throats for 2 years now since the October 7th attacks, and Hindu-Sikh relations are not much better, where Hindus and Sikhs have constantly been vandalizing each other's houses of worship over a hypothetical Sikh homeland. Just to reiterate, Jews, Muslims, Hindus and Sikhs are in our country rioting over creating their own new countries out of other existing countries. That's cultural.
But what if I told you that our population growth in the last 20 years has been average, exactly the average of the 80 years since the end of World War II. And if you then sort those decades in order of the percentage population increase in Australia, the last 10 years come out in 5th out of the 8 decades, 5th lowest, closer to the bottom than the top, in the bottom half of all of the decades since the end of the Second World War. And the previous 10 years before that, the decade from 2005 to 2014, it comes in at number 4 out of the last 8 decades.
That doesn't tell the whole story, as nobody came into this country for almost 2 entire years, and really only the time since December 2021 is relevant, as that is when borders opened up after COVID. There are a bunch of calculations on screen I won't bore you with. You can pause it if you wish to read it, but in the 13 quarters since the 4th quarter of 2021, there has been a quarterly population growth rate of 0.53%, and there are 40 quarters in a decade, which means Australia is on track in the 10 years between the 4th quarter of 2021 and the 3rd quarter of 2031 for a decennial population growth rate of over 21%. In 2031, over 1 in 5 people living in Australia were not in Australia prior to COVID. That means that the population growth in the decade between 2021 and 2031 is in line with the 3 decades between 1945 and 1974. You have to remember that the period from the mid-40s to the mid-60s was the baby boom, where the total fertility rate was consistently above 3, and this trend continued into the mid-70s when the total fertility rate was still above replacement rate. Population growth is not an adequate metric for determining when immigration was at its highest rate, because a significant portion of population growth was natural increase. Taking births out of the equation, the decade between 2021 and 2031 will be the largest population increase due to immigration in Australian history. A better metric for determining population growth relating to immigration is the percentage of the population that is foreign-born. Quarter 2 of 2024 marked the point in which the foreign-born population of Australia was at its highest level as a percentage of the population since the end of the Second World War, at 31.5% of the population.
The question is, how come Australia cannot cope with a perfectly routine level of population growth? How come we're breaking today when we coped with higher population growth more easily in the past?
Calling this population growth is a red herring, because population growth and immigration levels are 2 different things. And even if immigration was high back then, it wasn't. But even if it was, the reason Australia could not function today, but it could function back then, is because only high-skilled white immigrants were permitted into Australia, who would actually contribute through nation-building projects and who set up their own small businesses, and they would actually enrich the local community, rather than running around stabbing each other at rugby league games or murdering elderly grandmothers in front of their grandchildren. That's the difference.
Let's take a quick look around the world. Immigration is not what caused the collapse of the Soviet Union. Immigration is not what impoverished Venezuela. Immigration is not what brought starvation to North Korea. Each of their own governments did all of that to their own people, usually in the name of helping them. And when it started going wrong, the government distracted the people by making them waste their time and energy fighting each other.
Huh? What does that have to do with immigration? What does the domestic politics of countries on the other side of the world with no bearing on Australia have to do with Australian immigration policy. You're the one getting distracted. Why the fuck are you talking about the Soviet Union? The country hasn't existed for almost 35 years. And this frankly goes to show how fucking stupid you are, Topher. No communist country would ever let mass civil unrest erupt. If you try to stoke riot and division in North Korea, of all countries, then you should expect to spend a very long time doing hard labour. But you do raise an interesting point. They are trying to divide us by race, is your claim. The elites want to divide us by race. That's why they spent years deplatforming people critical of diversity, made free association illegal, throw people in jail for hate speech, put mixed race couples in all the advertising, cancel anybody who talks about biological race differences, spend billions on anti-racism advocacy, impose diversity quotas, make hundreds of movies about how racism is evil, and ban political parties for opposing multiculturalism.
Immigration has not passed laws to silence you and censor you or to make you register to use social media. That's the government. And immigration didn't take your job either. That's on you.
Actually, immigration is responsible for social media censorship. Why do you think among the mass red pilling of young men and frankly everybody else, because mass immigration has been such a disaster, that now you are seeing social media censorship? The average young white American male is a groper, and that wave is about to hit Australia like a tsunami. Nobody is ready for it. And if I were in Narbo's shoes, I'd also try to ban social media for under 16s and censor it for everybody else. But riddle me this, Mr. Field. If it's really a government problem and not an immigration problem, then why did the E-Karen censor videos of a black man murdering a white girl on a tram in the United States, or of an Islamic migrant murdering a Christian bishop in Western Sydney, and not one of your videos exposing government incompetence? And immigration is responsible for job losses. People are losing their jobs to immigrants because immigrants are willing to work for longer hours and accept lower wages and work in worse conditions, because no matter how poor the conditions may be, our worst jobs are still better than their best jobs. Because while whites are accustomed to the 9-to-5 grind, India doesn't have that, Vietnam doesn't have that, the Philippines doesn't have that, and China doesn't have that. Their citizens are used to working in poor working conditions, and because there are foreigners willing to work in conditions worse than what the average Australian would generally accept, Australians are having to lower their demands for employment to compete due to a glut of labour.
Government is the problem. Immigration and population growth is just the scapegoat.
Oh my goodness, how many times have you said that? Come up with another one-liner. How has the government scapegoated migrants? I honestly do not know what else to say, because you said something that was so stupid that I've been completely stumped. The government has scapegoated migrants? Huh? What planet are you living on? What is bro talking about?
But you've been duped by a combination of hysteria in the mainstream media and by opportunists in the alt media. You've been duped into believing that we're being overrun by a wave of people too big for us to possibly cope with. And their answer is to stop immigration. But the numbers show clearly that that whole premise is wrong. It just isn't happening.
What? As stated earlier, there was a media blackout on the second march for Australia, and the media spent its time calling those who attended the first march racist. The media even went out of their way to pin the violence towards the police at the second march on the Patriots, and when they were caught out, they failed to blame the communists again. And even the base right-wing media had a crack at us too. Paul Murray said he wouldn't touch this march with the 10-foot barge pole, not to mention the fact that Rupert Murdoch supports mass migration. And even within the supposed alternative media, Monica Smith condemned the march, slandered the organisers as Nazis, and she's running her own grifter march in November. George Jamal of Turning Point Australia also set up his own grifter march, and Scott Challenor, Shallow Chal, split from March for Australia Brisbane to run his own parallel march. All this does is dilute our power and dilute our influence. George Jamal, to his credit, endorsed the second march, but Monica is still going around promoting her own fake march with Tommy Robinson, a fake nationalist who is more patriotic for Israel than his own country, somebody who cucked for Israel, as the leading speaker. Why is he the leading speaker?
Fixing immigration is not a step in the right direction. It is a road to nowhere, and we don't have that amount of time to waste.
Correct. We don't have that much time to waste, which is why everybody should be focused on immigration now and focused on whatever you want to focus on in the future. Poland was communist for 50 years, and they're about to overtake the United Kingdom, a country that was never communist but was ruined by Thatcherism and Blairism. Argentina is finally trimming down its government after decades of big government Peronist socialism. The point is that we can reverse any governmental failures 10, 50, or even 100 years from now, but we can never reverse our own replacement. Once we're gone, we're gone. We can never stop the inevitable if we wait too late and get distracted by libertarianism.
The immigrants aren't destroying Australia. It's way worse than that. We are.
How? In what way are we destroying Australia? You are nothing but a race traitor and you should be ashamed of yourself. Migrants are destroying Australia. They are murdering us, they are raping our children, they are stealing our jobs, they constantly defraud our country, they steal our material possessions, they replace our holidays, they mock our gold, they steal our homes, they censor our speech, they bankrupt our country, and they think it's funny. They think it's fucking hilarious.
So when these newcomers who just got active during COVID, they want to point at campaigners like me and so many other far more amazing people who have given decades of their lives to this country, defending these newcomers from threats that they never even knew existed. And then these newcomers have the gall to look at them and to look at me and say, huh, what have you achieved? Well, what I want to say to them is, we've achieved a fuckload more than you ungrateful little shit.
Oh, bro, you're so cool. You said fuck. Oh, I'm so scared. The way you said it, it's like a boy in year 2 discovering swear words for the first time and you throwing it into every second sentence, even when the context doesn't warrant it. Who the hell do you think you are? I'd never seen your work until you had your little tantrum about the March for Australia. You need to realise that you are not as important as you think you are, and neither is your movement. Your party, the Libertarians, had over a 400% drop in your number of votes compared to 2022 when you were known as the Liberal Democrats. Not because you ran a poor campaign, but because most voters mistook you for the Liberal Party, which honestly goes to show the intelligence of Liberal voters. Thank God Libertarianism will never become a serious ideology in Australia, because it's an ideology of do-nothingism, meaning in Libertarian politics in practice is just crossing your fingers and praying everything works out. The left is willing to use government power for its own good and to benefit themselves. The right should be willing too. Libertarianism is a psyop. Don't fall for it.
Then find the cause that you are passionate about, find the people that are already fighting for it, and get behind them. Fight for women's rights, fight for small business, fight for our farmers, or get involved in politics directly, or fight for others who do get involved in politics. Australia is worth fighting for, and there are battles that need to be fought.
We have found our cause, immigration. Unfortunately, we are waiting for leaders with triple-digit IQs for our cause, but we have found our cause. We are just waiting for the right leaders.
Does Scott Morrison share your culture? How about Daniel Andrews? Is he more to your taste, more culturally aligned with you? Kevin Rudd? Malcolm Turnbull? Anthony Albanese? See, these are all good European names. These people come from good European stock. Are these the kinds of people? Is this the kind of culture that you want more of in Australia? Or are you perhaps willing to consider that when it comes to culture, you and I have more in common with the common folk from every other corner of the globe than what we have in common with these elites?
Yes, I do share that culture. The culture that created Anthony Albanese, Kevin Rudd, and Scott Morrison is the same culture that created you and I. We are all white Christian men influenced by the Protestant work ethic, human dignity, universal love, and forgiveness. We don't have more in common with the rest of the world for as long as Islamic culture entitles Islamic men to rape white women, Indian culture enables Indians to throw rubbish into their sacred waterways and feel comfortable shitting in the street, and Israeli culture commands Israelis to view Palestinians as subhuman who are worse than vermin. We do not have more in common with every other race than we do with our leaders. What a stupid thing to say. The idea that race isn't real and we're all just a blank slate is 20th century liberal nonsense. We all have to get that ridiculous idea out of our heads. I know it's an uncomfortable thought, but life is uncomfortable. Life is unfair. Get over it. In fact, did you know that if you had a child with someone of a different race, you would be less related to that child than some random white guy on the other side of the world? That's the end of this diatribe, thank goodness. That video was so fucking dumb. It's probably the worst pro-immigration video I've ever watched. Probably worse than the iDubbbz crash out I reacted to a few months ago where he said Bangladeshis were Italian. Topher would say the dumbest shit you have ever heard and say it with complete confidence and complete conviction and say it with a straight face and with the tone of voice that conveyed that he thought that we were the idiots. If you honestly think that importing over 2 million people in only 3-ish years and building only 700,000 homes has no effect on the housing market, not only do I have a bridge in Sydney to sell you, but frankly, you are a complete and utter fucking idiot who should frankly retire from politics because you know nothing. Anyways, I'll end the video here. Topher, if you're watching, how did you think I did? I think we should set up a debate to debate immigration. I know that many people in the Ozpol sphere would love to see it, and hopefully I at least get a response video from you. For everybody else, if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, tell me your thoughts. If there's anything you disagreed with me, with which you disagreed, tell me in the comments. Subscribe if you want to see more of this content. I've got a big December planned. join my Discord. Great things going on down there. I've got big plans for that as well. Follow me on all my social medias. I'm active there pretty often, especially on Twitter. I want to get more active on Instagram and other social medias. Why not join my Patreon for as little as $5 Australian dollars a month, where you can get early access to my Substacks and early access to my YouTube videos, and shout outs at the beginning of my YouTube videos and Substack articles, and you also get exclusive Discord benefits. So if that sounds interesting to you, why not join my Patreon? But my Discord is still free. You can join that, and you can subscribe to the channel for free. Subscribe to my second channel. I want to upload more there as well. I eventually want to start live streaming there. I want to get around 500 subscribers on that channel, so I can live stream and have donations built in, super chats built in, and I don't have to use a third-party platform. So please subscribe and like and comment and share the video as well to anybody who you think is pro-immigration. I think this is the definitive video for the definitive anti-immigration video to debunk the stupidest infantile pro-immigration claims regarding Australia. So please share it with a friend that is pro-immigration. Thank you all for watching. God bless you all. Stay tuned. Goodbye.